So hi guys, today we're going to talk about Starbucks. Their slogan is "Bring the rich, distinctive taste home." So their company profile is their mission statement is to inspire and nurture the human spirit. One person, one cup, and one neighbor at a time. But basically this is what I thought Starbucks was. Obviously. Expensive coffee that all girls love and go crazy about. Leggings, Uggs, and Starbucks. Now, I think that's kind of the common image that you get when you guys talk about Starbucks. Let's look into who started Starbucks. We have three guys. Jordan Boker, Jeff Siegel, and Jerry Baldwin. So Jordan, a little bit about Jordan, who is on the left, actually left school before finishing 8 credits of school left, so his university, and he left school to actually go write an educational script. So he was kind of like a writer. Now Jeff, on the other hand, who is in the middle, is from Detroit, Michigan, and he was actually a former public school history teacher before he started the business. And finally, Jerry Baldwin is the I think he's kind of like the main business guy, or he's the one who was kind of like, let's all start the business. And so he actually learned coffee trade from Alfred Pete. Obviously, you guys have heard about Pete before from Pete's Coffee and Tea, which will come in later. And so that's kind of how they started the business related to Starbucks, because they were inspired by his business. So the three things they have in common is, first of all, they attended the University of San Francisco, and they all love coffee and tea. So now in 1971, March 30th, the first store officially opened near the historic Pike Place Market in Seattle, Washington. For the funding, they basically got some investment and borrowed some money, and the name Starbucks actually comes from the classic tale Moby Dick. They also had a side story where they thought that name succeed when that starts with ST, so that kind of looked into stuff, and then obviously the classic tale came out. And the final reason that they were able to start was, obviously, we just mentioned that Pete was a big influence to these three people. And yes, that is the weird logo, but that's how it became Starbucks. So Pete actually encouraged to base their model on selling high quality beans and equipments at the time. So what they did was they purchased used roasters from Holland and experiment with Pete's roasting techniques to create their own style to deliver high quality beans. Now, their business for a couple of years was doing well. So in 1980, they actually got to open 4 stores in Seattle. And also, they had a brand image of actually delivering top quality fresh roasted coffees compared to their competitors back in 1980s, right? And so they were doing good. But one thing that was kind of unfortunate also at this time was that Siegel decided to leave company to pursue other interests. So Baldwin kind of became the role of the company president. Now in 1982 is kind of the big change for Starbucks. Now, Howard Schultz, he is a very interesting person, and he kind of is the one who made Starbucks this big. I did mention Starbucks does not sell coffee at this time. They just actually sold just coffee beans and equipment. So who is he? Why am I kind of like giving you guys a big warming up, like, you know, getting that like, hey, we're gonna talk about this person soon. So he graduated from Northern Michigan University in 1975 in communications, worked as a ski roadie, and then a salesman for Xerox in New York City. Then he got recruited as the general manager for a Swedish kitchenware manufacturer called Hammerplast, where he was actually in charge of the coffee machine manufacturer. So at one point, he had to visit Starbucks for his work to fill their plastic cone filter order. And when he got there, he was just like amazed at everything, like Starbucks and like their business and then their coffee. He's like, oh my God, I have to join this company. So he ended up joining the company as a director of retail operations and market. And his first task was to develop a customer-friendly sales skills and produce brochures, because he actually realized that first-time customers felt very uncomfortable with like their setup, or like they didn't really understand what they were supposed to do at Starbucks when they got there, obviously, because you're selling equipment and beans and you just don't know what to buy, like in terms of both beans and equipment. So he thought that by developing this customer-friendly sales skills and then the brochure helped customers be more friendly with the products that they were selling. So why mention? A year later, he was sent to travel to International Houseware Trade Show in Italy, Milan. And once he got there, he was just kind of like, oh my god. He experienced all the coffee shops nearby, and he didn't realize how amazing their espresso was. And apparently, Milan alone had 1,500 coffee houses, so cafes that they actually sold coffees. And he was just actually like super shocked in like how amazing, like, their mood. People just sit there, just have like espresso or like coffee in their hand, just drinking it and enjoying their views, like enjoying their time. And so he kind of envisioned turning, current Starbucks into a nation coffee house chain. So he actually wanted to start selling coffee and make it into a cafe. So he came back from Milan and he's like, okay, hey founders, I just came back from Milan and I found like this crazy ass idea that you guys should definitely try. So I think you guys should start offering like the traditional espresso beverage instead of just selling the whole beans. And you know what? People are gonna love it. Like make it into a mood where they can study and like do everything while drinking coffee, and like make it into like a famous like European Italian style coffee. But shockingly, the founders were like, it's like a good idea. It was like great, but no. Great job on going to Italy and thinking about all these ideas, but I don't think that's what we should do. Why they actually decided not to go that route was that it actually would change their traditional business model, because obviously they are focusing more on selling coffee beans. They're the high quality coffee bean selling Starbucks business. They also are selling like the equipment. So I think personally that they felt like if they were to serve espresso and cappuccino, that they'll just turn into like a low quality cafes. And they still wanted to maintain that high quality, we sell the best beans out there compared to other competitors. Well, Schultz was like, okay, well, screw you guys. I'ma leave. So he left Starbucks. Bye. So in 1984, the Starbucks founders still have to continue their business. So what they did was they actually purchased Peet's Coffee in the 4 Bay Area stores back in 1984 and try to expand their business related to just selling beans and equipment. Obviously, Peet's is also similar at that time of just selling the coffee beans along with business. So it kind of like matched well. Now in 1987, there was a huge change. So the founders was like, hey, I kind of want to start focusing on Peet's Coffee. I don't know about Starbucks. We've been trying to go high end and everything. I think it's time to sell it. The founder of Starbucks decided to sell Starbucks. Also kind of guessing why they had to sell it, not just because they wanted to focus on Peet's Coffee, but also because they couldn't expand any further. They only had 11 stores open with less than 100 employees at the time. So who bought it? This cafe called Il Giornale. It's supposed to be an Italian name. Sorry, I can't pronounce it well. And that cafe was ran by Schultz. Ta-da! He comes back. He actually comes back. So what he ended up doing was, after he left Starbucks, he actually started the cafe business because he thought it would have potential in growing big. And he named it after the Milan newspaper. So when he started this business, he asked 242 investors to invest in this idea, and 217 people rejected this. So when he actually started the cafe business right away, it was complete success. Like everyone just started loving it to a point he was able to expand into multiple cities. So it kind of got to a level where it was getting, kind of as big as Starbucks. So what he ended up doing was that he offered them $4 million to sell Starbucks. So at the time they only had 6 units of Starbucks chain, and the deal was sold. They were like, okay, we'll sell it to you. We'll give it to you. Screw that. So, what they rebranded Starbucks to, was to not just sell equipments and coffee, but also drinks now. And also for any domestic outlets, instead of giving franchise, he ended up retaining the ownership because he actually didn't believe in franchising. So he wanted everything in control for like having Starbucks out. And how successful was this? Well, shockingly very. So within 4 years, so with till like 1991, they grew the business from 20-ish, a bit lower, to more than 100 stores, and not just stayed in the Seattle region, but moved from like Chicago, like Cali, Vancouver, and all kind of like getting all over the US. Now in 1992, since they need more money, they decided to go public. Before they were making around $93 million for annual sales, which ended up being 4.1 million in profit. So when they went for their IPO, their original price was $17 per share, and they were selling only 12% of the company. And their closing price ended up being $21.50. So a lot of people kind of realize that this business is going to be successful. So their IPO earned them $271 million. And obviously their finance doubled and everything started going up from here. Now, interestingly, in 1994, they acquired a company named Coffee Connections for $23 million. And what this company made is something that all girls go crazy about during summertime. Is they gain rights to use, make, market, and sell Frappuccinos. So Frappuccino actually did not come from Starbucks, the company itself. They actually acquired a company. And the story behind it was interesting because the CEO of Coffee Connection heard about like this cappuccino being famous in the West Coast. And obviously, where did it start was Starbucks. And he was like, oh, Starbucks made this thing of like cappuccino, like sweet, and it was all like famous. What he needed to do was figure out a drink to make him successful. And he actually was located in Boston. So he went back to Boston and he was like, okay, we need to like blend stuff in and like make something and make it like so good that everyone wants to buy it. And so he basically blended a bunch of coffee, sugar, milk, ice. And what was different was the frozen yogurt machine to create like the creamy consistency. And he named it Frappuccino from the New England milkshake Frap. That's how it got famous. His business in Boston area was like, oh, like there's this new drink called Frappuccino. Let's all get it there. And so Starbucks came over and be like, hey, I heard you have this new drink called Frappuccino. Now we'll like buy your idea and everything for $23 million. And that's how it got sold. So they're actually making billions of dollars through Frappuccino even till this year. So if you guys haven't tried Frappuccino, definitely try it. Now, in 1996 to 1999, it became a huge international expansion of Starbucks. They actually became the first largest coffee house chain in the world. So their first store opened in Japan, this is actually their like place that it's open, and they apparently have this plaque that says it's the first store in Japan, or kind of internationally if you don't really count Canada. And then they moved on to EU, and then to China in 1999. So at the end of the decade, they had around like 2000, they had 2,500 locations in about a dozen countries. In 2000. Year 2000, guys. What's interesting here is that since they've acquired or they started launching China in 1999, Schultz was like, hey, China. So A year later, in 2000, he actually stepped down from the CEO position, but he still remained as the chairman. And the reason why was that he wanted to actually help out with the global strategist division so that he can help the company expand more internationally. And he actually wanted to expand it in the Chinese market. That's like the first market he wanted to like target and get big. So his goal of expanding was to open 1 to 2 stores a day in mainland China for a decade. Because he noticed that China is a huge market, even back in 2000. And China at this time wasn't accustomed to the Western culture to a point where a lot of the Chinese people couldn't drink coffee because of like the bitter taste compared to like their normal tea culture. So what Starbucks had to do to make it kind of like for them to be used to Starbucks and coffee was to make green tea flavored latte, and they'll slowly get used to the bitter taste, which actually ended up being successful. Now, 3 years later, they acquired more companies, this time from the AFC Enterprise, which owns Popeyes. I think it was KFC, one of the two, for $72 million. So Seattle's Best Coffee is a coffee retailer and wholesaler and marketed as more of like a working class coffee. So they were actually more found in college campus. So they're kind of like a low end, like cheap, reasonable priced coffee. Because as you guys know, remember guys, Starbucks at this time is still known to be a high quality coffee selling cafe. They also acquired Torre Pazzone Italiana. And this was actually a high-end brand of coffee beans. So they were trying to get like the both market of kind of the low end where people are getting used to it versus like the really high end of like the European Italian brand, right? Now in 2006 to 2008 becomes the huge fun part called Coffee War. And I never thought this would be like a legit thing, but it's apparently is. So basically what a coffee war is, they're trying to like fight against each other to increase brand and consumer market share. So basically it's kind of saying, hey, whose coffee is the best? And they fight about it. So the pros about that is that it's fun to watch. They call their name, they make fun of each other through ads, through commercials. But what really sucks is that because of the coffee war, a lot of small business can't survive. The biggest example that I got was Die Rich Coffee, who is the owner of Coffee People, which is a cafe chain in Oregon. And so they actually started dying out because Starbucks started buying or ending the business of Coffee People. So what they ended up doing was selling most of its company-owned retail stores to Starbucks, right? And that's kind of the start of the coffee war. And then what happened was that Starbucks had a coffee war with McDonald's and Dunkin' Donuts, guys. You would think McDonald's is more like a burger, and then they kind of have the coffee on the side, but it's not mandatory to drink it, or you don't really think about like the high-end like coffee, but it's out there. Yeah, and like McDonald's decided to get out the McCafe. And so after they released that McCafe and they have all these like McFluffy, flurries, I forgot the name of like the Frappuccino, there was a lot of things that started overlapping with Starbucks, and they were so mad. They were like, what? But then at the same time, McDonald's started like talking crap about Starbucks. They were like, $4 is dumb. They actually had a billboard that said that, right? And they also had one of the billboard that actually said, large is the new grande, kind of targeting Starbucks. It's a good way for McDonald's to use Starbucks to get their McCafe business out there. But because of that, Starbucks gets mad and they're like, okay, well, like, screw you guys. We're just gonna own a bunch of more, like, Starbucksy type of cafes out there. So we're gonna look for all those. And the same thing goes with Dunkin' Donuts. They would also start launching, like, an ad campaign, being like, America runs on Dunkin', and then create all these, like, way of creating ads to kind of get help from Starbucks into saying, hey, not just you're a coffee place, but I'm a coffee place too, and we're cooler than you. So they just have these wars, and people say, hey, the war ended, we can decide who's who, what's better, blah blah blah, but still doesn't know. And along with McDonald's, obviously McDonald's do sell very cheap price, so a lot of analysts did conclude saying Starbucks is kind of like the high-end coffee selling company compared to McDonald's, which is like the cheap brand where they have like the $99, and then there's kind of like Dunkin' there too. And then in 2008, 2008, guys, 2008, Starbucks chairman actually finally returns back to CEO because he kind of noticed that the market wasn't doing well. So he wanted to take the initiative of, hey, okay, you guys are having troubles, like, and then the CEO actually before left too. So he's like, okay, let me just come back and then we'll try to be more secure and figure out a new strategy to secure growth. Because something that he noticed was that all these closures, 600 stores, guys. But before that, when he became the CEO, he was like, these are the things that we're going to transform. Like, these are the things that we're going to make it better. The agenda includes like improving the current state of US business, building for the long term, expanding the company's presence, blah, blah, blah. But reality, what he wanted to do in terms of this new strategy was look into the bakery and figuring out like the makers of coffee brewing systems. So this is like the next era of what comes in Starbucks. But before that, of all of like the bakery and stuff, what's shocking in 2008 was that they noticed that there's a lot of closures of stores, cut of a lot of retail jobs. They actually had to close internationally because of the Great Depression wasn't doing so well. They did cut 1,000 non-retail jobs, and kind of interesting, I don't know why, but in Australia, of all the countries, they actually closed 61 stores out of 80 some in Australia. So Starbucks wasn't doing well in Australia. They must have not liked the taste, or their business model wasn't doing so well in Australia, like compared to the other countries. That's what's happening in 2008. So let's look into the spoilers. One of the biggest things that happened in 2011 was mobile payment debuted nationally at Starbucks. As you guys know, nowadays, Starbucks is using app to pay and order. And this is when it actually came out, 2011. It went phenomenal. It was amazing. Whoever thought of this idea should get like the award, because what's good about the mobile payment, and I still remember the first time I used it, was that you basically order it. They kind of tell you what time it's going to be ready around. They didn't do that earlier. What I think they were trained to do was focus more on, hey, when you get an order, focus more on that than the person waiting. I don't know why. So the rumor says that you should be ordering first instead of actually going there because it's much easier. Well, this comes in handy later on in 2021. What was interesting that they've noticed was that in 2013, their mobile payment at the US Starbucks location was increasing a lot. They noticed that pay by app is like the new trend that everyone should be slowly moving on to, and that like it's what's going to be the future, which they did predict it well. And that the lesson here was that Starbucks is actually putting a lot of weight behind mobile digital like technologies. Interesting random fact out there was that in 2013 they decided to write calories on their food. Why? Because kind of federal requirement. And then other food companies were actually writing calories. So, you know, the obesity in US is a major problem. So what they did was they write the calories. Companies like Subway and Panera actually do write it. So even if they have all those like crazy orders, apparently they're supposed to write the calories on it. So if you actually look at your mobile app on the side, they tell you calories. And then if you add on any of the syrups or everything, they also include that to how much you're drinking. Now in 2018, they decided to actually look into blockchain technology, guys. I don't know if you guys remember, but 2018 was like the hottest, like everyone's jumping into blockchain. And so what their plan on using blockchain was to connect farmers with coffee drinkers. So apparently the farmers in like the Costa Rica, Colombia, and all those places that's known for coffee beans, they're gonna figure out a way, like develop a new way to track the beans to cup. So the name of it was Beans to Cup Business. So that the point of this was to kind of be, you know, transparent and accountable, and so that it kind of shows that Starbucks were very committed to creating a product that is good for people and for the planet. So, you know, it's like, hey, we're the goal of blockchain is transparent and it works perfectly to my thing. So I guess in a way it's good because you know where your beans are apparently from, I guess where when it's coming to your cup, but is it necessary? I'm not sure. They haven't talked more related to blockchains in 2021, so I don't know if that's coming true or if they're just waiting until the technology is more settled or if they're thinking about going into NFT. The news was out there back in 2018. Now in 2019, they decided to stop selling newspaper. So they're going now super techie. Like, now they're trying to fit in with the Zoomers. No more newspapers. They're like, screw newspapers. You guys can't read. Obviously, New York Times actually got mad. They were like, excuse me. They actually quoted on a newspaper being like, excuse me. I don't like this idea. I don't know why you're doing this. Well, sorry, but we're trying to save the earth. And it kind of makes sense. Like, who reads printed newspaper? Sorry to say that. They didn't say this, but they did say that obviously New York Times was like, we are very unfortunate this happened and we're like sad, but you know, there are probably going to be printed newspapers out there somewhere. So no more newspapers. And they also decided to create a kiosk for grab and go snacks. So they're doing a very good job making adjustment to the changes in the trend. And so they're stopped selling a lot of old stuff. So even back in 2015, they decided to stop selling CDs, guys. They actually sold CDs. They also cut down on a lot of like merchandise. They're doing a lot of moving to digital. We're very being trendy. We're all being also cool. And also in 2019, something that happened interesting was that the biggest store opened for Starbucks. Where? Chicago. And who's been there? Me. So I've been there, guys. I've been to the Starbucks roastery. It will be out there soon. We'll get to see it. I'm there. I had a little moment. I was screen capturing this. I was there like 3 weeks ago. They did open their world's largest roastery location. You would think that it might be New York or even Seattle, but it's actually in Chicago. It's a 5-story location, 35,000 square feet. Apparently, it's overtaking the Tokyo roastery. So yeah, it was first announced to be built in 2017, and it finally did build in 2019. And that it's supposed to have 200 employees for that one roastery. And the point of this roastery was to be like a tourist attraction. Obviously, it's there. I'm a tourist. I was there. I was taking pictures. I was taking videos. It was really cool. Definitely try visiting there because it has really nice like things. And it's very like neat and bright. And, you know, they have a rooftop place too. And you can also get cocktails. Yeah. So they have bars with cocktails, fancy food. They have like really nice fancy places, take good pictures. So moving on to 2020, obviously the biggest news is going to be COVID. And because of COVID, Starbucks also had a lot of issues. So the number one thing that they had to do was close all cafe only stores. So those that where you have to walk in and sit, they decided to close all those doors. So they only allowed like drive-through and delivery service. And so in terms of profit, because they had to cut all those down, they lost 10% of sales. And shockingly for China, it was 50%, 50. So then in mid-2020, what happened was that they actually had to close 400 locations that are more walked in and had to reopen more of like the delivery or the drive-through system. And so that being said, what Starbucks ended up doing was focusing more on the mobile app for like prepayment by customers before arrival. So they were moving on to being more like a digital ordering coffee house instead of walking, which actually was a big improvement, and it's really, really helpful. And also what happened in 2020 was the eco-friendly Starbucks. I think the biggest success for the eco-friendly part was the Strawless Lid. Which, okay, honestly, if it's been like a 19-some company, like how did they not think about this earlier? They have developed this. Everyone loves it. I love it. I bet you guys love it. So apparently, when you create the lid, it's 9% less plastic than the flat lid. Can you guys believe it? It's 9% less plastic for the lid itself. And the fact that they have now strawless lid is good for the environment because apparently the straws are actually harder to recycle. And this strawless lid is made by plastic that's like recyclable. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, but as long as they did it, it's great, right? And who do we credit to is Andy Corlett, who has developed this. He is working more in the packaging industry. So big shout out to this guy for making this, which is great. That was kind of the big important part of 2020. So let's see what happened in 2021. Starbucks in 2021, you see the graph, and shockingly, you would see a lot of downfalls, but the only downfall you notice is in the COVID region and the 2008 when, it wasn't even that downfall, but like the Great Depression definitely caused, So a lot of people say, hey, this is kind of like the power of Schultz. Because every time he comes in, the stock just goes up crazy. Kind of. You know what I mean? So when he came in early, like 1980 some, obviously you see that big flow. And then kind of maybe it was Great Depression, but when he kind of left and he was like, hey, let's look into other things, it was kind of like down. Joke said. But he did save Starbucks. Also, a couple of points to point out was 2006, which I pointed there, was the coffee war. So it kind of had that like fluctuating, but it was at the time the highest. And then obviously the 2011 was going high because it was actually moving onto the mobile app from just actually going in there. And then 2019, which is like the big jump, is the no paper and moving on to the kiosk. So they're being more digital and then opening up in a lot of places. So that being said, let's talk about what's going to happen or what they're trying to do in 2021. Starbucks opens a farmer support center in Brazil for coffee growing. So they are thinking about opening a place in Brazil to grow coffees and have like a place where we can have farmers help grow coffee. So they're going to have some type of Brazilian coffee styles probably coming out, and it's going to be really good. And a couple of places out there that Starbucks has opened, obviously Ethiopia, Brazil is now starting up, Guatemala, Mexico, Costa Rica, Colombia, so a lot of the southern areas. Also in 2021, they are collabing with Nestle to bring in the ready-to-drink coffee. So like the cans, right? They're pre-made cans with Nestle. So they decided to do kind of like a 3-year partnership where they're going to have like the Frappuccinos, the Starbucks Frappuccino, and then the Starbucks Double Shot. It's going to be great. They're actually opening in select markets across Southeast Asia, Oceania, and they're hoping to get it out there by 2022. Also what's interesting in 2021 is the recent thing that I went to was Starbucks Pickup and Amazon Go are going to collaborate to launch New York store concept in New York City. Shockingly, why did I not go to one of these? So they were actually open on November 18th, 2021. So I could have gone and experienced this, but they're going to collaborate. So people who don't know Amazon Go basically is you just go in and you just pick something up and you just leave. And apparently you check your Amazon app and it'll tell you, hey, you just pay for that. And it'll be kind of creepy at first because you're like, are you guys like stalkers? Like, where are you guys stalking me? But sometimes it's kind of cool because then they don't need a worker. I don't have to talk to like a worker there to buy something. So how are they going to collab with Starbucks? I was kind of like, I tried looking up the Google picture and then I just saw this picture and I was like, okay, there is someone working. So how I still don't understand how it's going to work. Well, apparently they're just going to have Amazon Go and then have Starbucks inside. They're going to offer the full Starbucks menu and all of the like the beverages and the food inside the Amazon Go market, such as like the salad, the sandwiches, and the bakery and the snacks. So how it's going to work is that they go to this location, which is on between Park and Lexington Avenue at 59th Street. And you're supposed to pick that area. It's apparently called like Amazon Go with Starbucks. And the customer arrives to the location, but prior to that, you're supposed to order it. And then they find the status of their order on this digital screen. and they'll say it's ready, and then they just pick it up from the barista without paying for it, and they just leave. And then apparently I think it goes through either like Amazon Go or you pay separately with your Starbucks account. So voila. So we'll see if this business model will succeed and that like other places, not just in New York, it'll come out. I'm not sure. I haven't actually seen Amazon Go somewhere outside of New York yet. Even I haven't seen it in Chicago. Maybe I've like toured around there. But that's all for the recent news up to 2021.